Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I'm coming at you with a process video using the Holy, Holy, Holy devotional kit from ByTheWell4God. I do have an unboxing of this kit, so I'll link it down below. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, Lindsay, you're a little behind on kits because I haven't seen any videos. I know, I'm still working through a couple of last month's devotional kits. I think what I'll do is like I did in the summer, I will work on them this weekend and then do a wrap-up video for you guys. So don't feel like I ditched out on Adorned. I will be coming back to that, but I wanted to do a process video because with this kit, we are doing something super fun. So the creative team got together. Gail is amazing. She wrangles all of us together like a bunch of wet cats and gets us on task. And she had the idea to do a challenge each week. So this week's going to be a short week. It's going to go through today until Saturday. And the challenge is to use one of the girls from the kit that closely resembles you. That's it. You can do whatever you want with the kit, a page, a memory dex card, a traveler's notebook, whatever you want to do. The challenge is just to use one of the girls that closely resembles you. So I wanted to mention that, and then going on out, the challenges will go from Sunday to Saturday, and I do believe that she's doing a giveaway that she is going to be doing the prize for. So check out the ByTheWell4God Instagram. They should have all the information over there. And Gail usually is good about hopping on the live and sharing stuff like that. So I picked this girl here. Now, my hair is much longer and not quite as red, but I just thought her like sassiness totally is me. So the rest of these girls are just a little more, you know, put together, quiet, demure, and this one's like, oh yeah, I'm sassy. So that's me. And I'm working with something kind of unique. So I'm working on day 2. I went ahead and just took some notes and some journaling for day 1. For day 2, I wanted to come over to 1 Peter 1:15 because we're talking about what is holy, what's the definition of holy, and just kind of using that to kick off the kit. And so when I turned to 1 Peter, I've already journaled a ByTheWell4God kit entry here. So I'm actually going to do a tip-in, and I get a lot of questions about putting tip-ins in the illustrating Bible because it is ring-bound. I have done several videos. I will link them down below, but I thought I would do another one just to show you guys how I do that and what I create. So what I have here is just a piece of watercolor paper. I will link everything down below for you guys, and this is cut to I believe 6 inches wide by like 9 inches tall, I think is what it is. So it should fit, maybe it's like 8.5 inches tall. Anyways, it should fit in the illustrating Bible. I have the vellum piece. I have one of the little doilies, one of the gals, one of the die cut pieces. And then the fun thing about working on a separate piece instead of directly into your Bible is you can kind of go crazy and use whatever mediums you want and not have to worry about ruining the page. So I'm going to do a little bit more mixed medium, which I typically do in my Bible anyways, but I'm going to be doing some watercolor background. I pulled out this Tim Holtz stencil. It's roses. I believe you can get this from ByTheWell4God. I'm going to go in and layer some of this. I pulled out tons of stamp sets. I think that I'm going to use the His Story stamp set. This is the bigger one. And use some of these as more as like background textures, so I'm going to use that. I've also pulled out the Holy, Holy, Holy one that comes with the kit. I think I'm going to use this stamp set here, or this stamp here. I've got the new alphabets. I'm going to be using those. And then I pulled out these ones, Spring Petals, Blooming Prayers, and Scribbles and Doodles. I wasn't sure if I was going to use any of these as some additional elements, so we'll kind of see how that plays out. Off camera, I went ahead and typed out the 1 Peter 1:15 verse using my typewriter and just some cardstock. You could also use your computer and just print out using a type font, and that should get the job done. So I think I'm going to be using some alphabet stickers, some Distress Oxide ink, and I have the We Are Memory Keepers punch board with the spiral punches. This is an additional punch set that you can purchase to go with the punch board. Again, everything will be linked down below, and this is what I'm going to use to punch my spiral holes to go into the illustrating Bible. So let me go ahead and put you on fast forward and we'll put together this tip-in. Okay, so I have my tip-in on a little scrap of a nonstick craft sheet, and that's just to protect my work surface as I get crazy with paint. So I initially thought I was going to do some ink smushing, so I put the watercolor on that piece of transparency and was smushing it down on the page, but that was going to take way too long. So I just sprayed some water on the paper and then started plopping watercolor down on there. I am using the watercolors that come in the kit there, and I'm just using a mixture of the like minty colors and the blues. And since you're working on watercolor paper, it's intended for watercolor and water, and so you can spray it, you can add lots of paint. You can see I'm kind of tapping it and moving the paint around. You can't quite do this in your Bible. I have done this technique in my Bible, but it's a little bit more fussy and difficult because that paper isn't really meant for lots and lots of water. So that's the nice thing about working on a separate piece like this, is you can kind of go crazy. So I did go ahead and dry that, and then now I'm going in with the His Story stamp set. I thought about stamping with Neocolor 2 crayons, but then I thought it'd be too messy and take too long. So I switched it out for some tumbled glass Distress Oxide ink, and you can see I'm not putting the stamp on a block. I'm just using my fingers to ink up the stamp and then press it down on the page. I'm wanting this just to be a textural element on the background. And that's kind of the fun thing about mixed media pieces. It's just all about the layers, building up using different mediums like watercolors and inks and paints and die cuts and washi tape and all those kind of fun things. So I've swapped it out for the dot grid, and I'm doing the same technique using some worn lipstick. So I just want little pops of that pink. I'm really trying to keep it monochromatic with those like blues and black and white. So I'm going to bring in some more black, and you're going to be like, whoa, Lindsey, what are you doing? That's scary. I'm going to stencil through the stencil with Black Soot Distress Oxide ink. And there's a couple different ways that you can use stencils. I'm choosing to blend the ink through using a makeup brush. Any fluffy face brush will work for this. And this just gives you a little bit more control, and you can build up the intensity. I do want it pretty deep black. I want this to be very, like, a lot of contrast between the background. But if you're intimidated by something like this, using a makeup brush really helps because you can slowly build up the color. Now, I don't know if you noticed with the Tim Holtz stencils, they are really thin, but here you can see where I'm overlapping the stencil on itself, and so I can get a continuous pattern. So even with this stencil here, you just kind of have to look at it. Usually it's images that are towards the edge of the stencil are the ones that overlap, and so you can get a continuous pattern across a larger surface, if that makes sense. So I'm just building that up and filling it in. If you knew that you wanted a lot of intensity of color all at once, then use the foam blending brushes from Ranger. That is a great option for, blending these inks. But if you're wanting control and wanting a softer look, then go for that makeup brush instead. So make sure that was good and dry, and then we're going to move on to adding some layering pieces here. In hindsight, I should have done my ink splattering that I'm going to do here in a minute before I did all this, but that's okay. So learn from my mistakes. So I'm just kind of flipping through, looking at what I got, trying to figure out if I want to add some more stamping. I am going to do some note taking on here, so I'm just trying to keep in mind that I want to keep a free open space for lots of notes. That's the other nice thing about doing a big tip-in like this, is you have plenty of room. So I'm going to stick down that vellum hymnal piece there. I just added a little bit of adhesive to it where I knew my die cut cluster was going to be, and that way the adhesive's kind of hidden behind that girl, if that makes sense. This washi tape here is a Maggie Holmes washi tape. I don't think it's available anymore. I found it from Tuesday Mornings. If I can find it online, I'll link it down below, but just use what you have in your stash. I just like that this one had similar colors to what I was using for this particular page. So I'm just adding little bits and pieces of that here and there. And then that holy, holy, holy piece will kind of act like a tab up at the top there. I'm going to swap out that doily for the pink one just to pull in a little bit more pink and help that girl kind of stand out from the background. It's starting to get a little busy just because I have so many different textures and things going on, but it's okay. It all comes together. So I'm going to set that aside for a second and work on some stamping. I've seen Heba from My Little Journal. She's here on YouTube. She does this technique very often where she stamps out florals and just leaves them black and white. Doesn't color them in, fussy cuts them out, and uses them as a layering element. So that is what I'm doing. I am using another piece of watercolor paper just so my papers match. I went ahead and stamped those out and then fussy cut them, and they are going to be layered up here in a second. But here's where I add my ink splatters. I'm using quinacridone rose and black Amsterdam inks. Vellum does not like moisture, so in this ink is very, very wet, and it takes a very long time to dry, and so you have to use a lot of heat if you're using your heat tool, and so my vellum does warp a little bit. So if that bothers you, you want to do this step before adding your vellum down, but I was just in the moment and going crazy, so we make it work. But I'm just using a big fan brush to add those little splatters on there. I made sure that was good and dry before I started adding these kind of things, because I don't want to drag my hand through those droplets of ink. So here you can see I'm layering these black and white florals. So I love that it adds an additional layer and adds those florals without competing colors. If I was to paint these in, it would be super busy. Everything would kind of get mushed together. So by leaving it black and white really kind of helps things to stand out and pop off of each other while still having some florals on there. And you can see I just kind of stage things where I want it and then slowly start tucking things in with the adhesive. And that way I can kind of build up my cluster and get everything where I want it to be. And I'm just trying to be mindful of where I stick the adhesive kind of behind the doily, so no adhesives, I'm keeping it to the center so no adhesive kind of pokes through the holes of the doily, and that kind of thing. I'm going to add down my verse. I am going to kind of move it around, so I'm trying to keep in mind where my hole punching is going to go, and in the end I end up moving it over just a little bit more. But it's at this time I decide I probably should go ahead and hole punch. So for a second here I forget how to do it because it's been a while, but you want to have your spiral punch right in the center of the punch board, and you're going to line up the bottom of the page with the edge of the punch, and then punch it, and then you slide it down, and the topmost punched hole overlaps on the graphic that's on the punch. I know that sounds like a lot. I have a video where I go in depth on how to use this, so I'll link it down below if you have questions about that. But it's pretty easy once you get in there and start punching. And you just move it along, keep punching all the way down until you have all of the punching on the edge there. And this is perfectly sized to fit in the illustrating Bible. So there, it's all ready to go. So now I'm going to start working on some stamping. So the day 2 of the devotional does a lot of Hebrew word definition breakdown, and so I want to make sure that I include that on here, just because that's something really unique to the ByTheWell4God kits and her devotionals, and I love that they do that, and so I want to include that those Hebrew words and the definitions on this page. So I'm using the page stamp set and the Elemental Alpha stamp set. I am going to go ahead and use my stamp positioning tool for a couple different reasons. I'm stamping a lot of letters, so I want to make sure everything's straight, but I'm also stamping on watercolor paper, which is textured, so I want to be able to have the ability to stamp multiple times and not have the page move around. So I'm going to load up my letters to spell out what is, ink it up with some black ink, and then stamp it down. I get a pretty good impression, but I want it to be even deeper black, and since I'm in the stamp positioning tool, I can just ink it up, stamp it again, and it's right where it needs to be. So I'm going to mix it in with the Elemental Alphas, so I am leaving the what is portion in there while I lay out my word holy. That way I can get the positioning right. At this point, I'm going to stamp holy in a different color. If I had done it all in black, I could have lined up all of these letters all at once and stamped it all at the same time. But you're kind of watching the process as it comes along. So I'm thinking at this point, I'm going to stamp it in a different color. Now I can pull off what is, and I just have holy on there, and I'm inking it up with that Worn Lipstick Distress Oxide ink. And it would have been fine, except that where it's overlapping that rose is very difficult to see. But that's okay, because I'm in the stamp positioning tool, I can change things up. So without moving my paper, I can leave all my stamps where they're at, re-ink it with black ink instead, and then re-stamp it, and it's exactly where it needs to be. And now my oops is fixed, and it's not a problem. So these stamp positioning tools, I think, are worth the investment. They just make life a little bit easier if you struggle with, stamping and getting things stamped straight or, that kind of thing. It saved me a time or two. And then I went back to the page stamp set and pulled out the question mark and added that. Now I want to do some fun detail on the inside of these letters because they're open, so you can kind of do whatever you want. So I'm pulling out my much neglected Inktense pencils. I know I haven't used these in a while. This is just the black one. I think it's like ink or black ink or something like that. I'm just adding a little bit of the pencil to the bottom of the letters. It doesn't take much pencil at all. These are very, very intense in color, hence the name Inktense, and they react with water. So then I can just go in with a small detail paintbrush, activate the pigment, and then drag it towards the top. I'm wanting a kind of gradient ombre effect in these letters. So I want it darker at the bottom and then kind of fading out as it goes towards the top. If you don't have Inktense, you can do this with watercolor pencils. You can do this with the watercolor that's included in the kit. You can do this with Neocolor 2 crayons. Any water-soluble medium, you could do the same thing. I just like the precision that I can get with the pencil itself. I can lay down the color exactly where I want it. You do want to be careful when you're going over areas like this stenciled rose. Because I stenciled it with Distress Oxide ink, that is a water reactive ink. So the pigment is going to move a little bit. So you want to be careful when going over that area. So now I'm going to use a mixture of the Tile Alphas and some enamel stickers that I have in my stash to spell out those definitions and get those down on the page. And we're defining what it means to be holy. Now, I had mentioned in the unboxing about how these ladies look set apart because they're all glammed up and all done up, and I love that connection that's being made. But I did see some comments, and I wanted to address it, kind of approaching upon legalism a little bit. There were some comments about how we miss these days, how we wish people would dress up to go to church again. And while, yes, I miss that, I miss the reverence that we have going to church, I do want to comment on that. Just be careful not to get into too legalistic of a view. I would rather some young girl in a crop top come to church than not come to church at all because she feels like she's not dressed appropriately. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about, how to dress when you go to church. I just wanted to make sure I made a comment about that as we kick off this kit, because we don't want to confuse holiness with legalism. So just be careful when you study that. So you can see that just popped right into my Bible. It's all done. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Check out the description box for links to everything that I used today. Give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.